I never thought I'd become the neighborhood's cautionary tale. 3 months after I hung the hand-painted Whisk and Wonder sign above my dream bakery, I was packing everything into cardboard boxes labeled failure in my mind. The morning light filtered through windows. I'd scrubbed myself, catching dust particles that danced around empty display cases where my pastries once sat proudly. "You lasted longer than I expected," said Marcus, the landlord, leaning against the doorframe with keys jingling impatiently in his hand. His eyes surveyed the space like he was already measuring it for the next tenant. "The realtor already has 3 interested parties. Location's prime, just needed the right business." "The right business, not mine." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I'll be out by noon." When I signed the lease in Willow Heights, I thought I was joining a community. The brochures showcased tree-lined streets, families at farmers' markets, and a downtown strip with charming independent businesses. What they didn't mention was the unwritten social hierarchy, the whispered judgments, and the way the seemingly picture-perfect suburb devoured dreams that didn't fit its aesthetic. My grandmother's recipes deserved better. My mother's inheritance deserved better. But here I was, watching my last remaining employee, sweet, patient Zoe, wrap the vintage cake stands my mother had collected before cancer took her. "Sam, do you want me to pack these separately?" Zoe held up the leather-bound recipe book, its pages stained with vanilla extract and memories. "I'll take that," I said, carefully tucking it into my bag. It contained my history. 3 generations of women who believed butter and sugar could heal broken hearts. My grandmother's red velvet cake had comforted widows. My mother's lavender shortbread had celebrated new lives. And my creations? They'd become Instagram jokes among local influencers who preferred the imported coffee and machine-made pastries. At Sweet Bean down the street. The final blow came last week. The Willow Heights Community Association had commissioned a cake for their monthly meeting. I'd stayed up all night perfecting a 3-tier masterpiece with hand-piped neighborhood landmarks. When I delivered it, Christine Whitman, the association president with her perfect blonde bob and perpetual Lululemon wardrobe, had looked at it with thinly veiled disgust. "Oh, it's rustic, isn't it?" she'd said, emphasizing the word like it was a disease. "We were expecting something more elegant, like what Sweet Bean does." I'd driven home with the cake melting in my passenger seat, mascara streaming down my face. Now, as I taped the last box shut, my phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Willow Heights Community Festival. Tomorrow. Volunteer shift, 12 to 4 p.m. I nearly deleted it. Why torture myself by showing up at a community event where I'd face pitying looks and whispered comments? But something in me, stubbornness, pride, or just the inability to admit total defeat, made me keep the reminder. "You don't have to go," Zoe said, reading my expression. "I signed up weeks ago. I should honor my commitment." I sounded more confident than I felt. Zoe squeezed my shoulder. "That's why your bakery deserved to make it, Sam. You've got more integrity in your pinky finger than this whole neighborhood has combined." After Zoe left, I stood alone in the empty shop. Sunlight caught the faint outline where my sign had hung, a ghost of what could have been. I touched the wall, remembering how I'd painted it myself. The soft, butter yellow that my mother always said made people feel welcome. "I'm sorry, Mom," I whispered. I tried. My apartment felt emptier than usual that night. Boxes of unsold baking equipment crowded the living room, and the scent of failure clung to my clothes. I showered until the hot water ran out, trying to wash away the humiliation. As I lay in bed, I scrolled through the bakery's Instagram account one last time. The comments on my final post, a simple, "Thank you for your support. Whisk and Wonder is now closed," ranged from shocked to smugly unsurprised. Willow Local News. Another one bites the dust. When will people learn that artisan doesn't sell here? Christine Whitman official. Such a shame. Guess not everyone has what it takes to make it in Willow Heights Business District. Thai Sweet Bean Cafe. We're sad to see a fellow business close. Drop by for a consolation latte. Support local, but really us. I deleted the app from my phone and curled into a ball, letting the tears come freely. Tomorrow, I would face them all with whatever dignity I had left. The festival grounds buzzed with activity when I arrived the next day. White tents dotted the community park, and children raced across the grass with painted faces. I'd made an effort. Hair neatly styled, casual but put-together outfit. A smile practiced in the mirror that I hoped didn't look as brittle as it felt. "Samantha, you made it!" Christine's voice carried across the sign-in table, her tone suggesting surprise that I hadn't fled town in shame. "We've got you on lemonade duty. Tent number 4. I nodded, collecting my volunteer badge and apron. Such a shame about your little bakery, she added, her friends beside her exchanging glances. Maybe it was just ahead of its time. Or behind it, muttered a woman I recognized as the local real estate maven who'd recently listed a property next to where my shop had been. Perfect for an upscale business, her listing had specified. I kept my smile. Fixed, though it felt like concrete cracking. Thanks for your concern. As I walked away, I heard Christine stage whisper. She really thought she could make it with those sad little cupcakes. The lemonade stand was mercifully busy, giving me little time to dwell on the constant reminder of my failure. For 3 hours, I poured drinks, made change, and weathered the pitying glances from former customers. My daughter was so disappointed when your shop closed, one mother said, not unkindly. She loved those butterfly cookies you made. Thank you, I said, surprised by the genuine comment. That means a lot. The afternoon heat intensified, and the crowd thinned as people sought shade. During a lull, I spotted an elderly man sitting alone on a bench near the food stalls. Something about his solitary figure caught my attention. Perhaps the careful way he straightened his cardigan despite the heat, or how he clutched a small paper bag like it contained treasure. I was about to look away when he suddenly slumped forward, the paper bag falling from his grasp. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The group of neighborhood women chatting nearby, including Christine, paused, looking uncertain. I didn't think. I just ran. By the time I reached him, the elderly man's face had gone ashen. I knelt beside the bench, gently touching his shoulder. Sir, can you hear me? His eyes fluttered open, cloudy blue, confused. Margaret? He whispered. No, sir. My name is Samantha. I think you might need some help. I glanced around desperately. Can someone call an ambulance? The festival goers had formed a hesitant circle, smartphones raised like they were documenting a spectacle rather than a medical emergency. Christine and her friends stood frozen, their perfect manicures pressed to their mouths in shock. Someone call 911, I shouted, surprising myself with the authority in my voice. A teenage boy nodded and stepped away, phone to his ear. I turned back to the elderly man who was trying to sit up. My medication? He murmured, patting his pockets with trembling hands. I forgot. What kind of medication, sir? I asked, supporting his back. Heart pills. His gaze drifted to the paper bag that had fallen. I retrieved it, finding 3 orange prescription bottles inside, along with what looked like crumpled receipts and a small cloth pouch. I read the labels. Quickly, found the heart medication, and helped him take a pill with water from my volunteer station. Thank you, young lady, he said after a few minutes, color slowly returning to his face. I'm Calvin Miller. Nice to meet you, Mr. Miller. I'm Samantha Riley. Recognition flickered in his eyes. Riley, the baker? My heart sank. Even in his distress, he knew me as the neighborhood failure. Yes, that was me. I closed recently. You made Margaret's cake, he said, his voice suddenly clear. Red velvet, lavender glaze. I blinked in surprise. Your wife? He nodded, fingers tracing the edge of the cloth pouch I now recognized as a lavender sachet, one of the small touches I'd added to special orders. Her funeral, last year. You wouldn't take payment. The memory rushed back. A quiet, devastated old man who'd wandered into my shop during my first month, clutching a faded recipe card. He'd asked if I could recreate his late wife's favorite cake for her memorial service. I'd spent hours getting it perfect, and when he'd tried to pay, I couldn't bring myself to take his money. I remember, I said softly. It was an honor to make it for her. The paramedics arrived, efficiently assessing Calvin while I stepped back into the crowd. As they helped him onto a stretcher, he reached for my hand. You kept the recipe, didn't you? He asked, eyes suddenly intense. Margaret's recipe? I nodded, surprised he remembered such a detail. Yes, in my grandmother's book. I never share special recipes, but I keep them all. A faint smile crossed his face. Good. That's good. As they wheeled him away, I noticed Christine approaching with a forced, sympathetic expression. Well, that was dramatic, she said, adjusting her designer sunglasses. You certainly jumped right in there, didn't you? Someone had to, I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. She tilted her head. Do you know him? He was a customer. Once? I didn't elaborate, didn't share the story of the memorial cake. Some moments weren't meant for public consumption. Oh, that's Calvin Miller, interjected another woman, lowering her voice to a gossipy whisper. He used to be somebody important in city planning before he retired. Barely leaves his house since his wife died. Lives in that big Victorian on Maple Street. His granddaughter visits sometimes, added another. She's some hotshot food writer or critic. Very standoffish? Christine's eyebrows shot up with sudden interest. A food critic? Really? I don't suppose you got her contact information? Her gaze turned calculating, and I knew she was thinking about Sweet Bean and positive press. I didn't even know he had a granddaughter, I said, gathering my things. My shift was over, and exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders. Excuse me, I should go. Walking home, I felt the day's emotions catch up with me. The humiliation of those whispers, the adrenaline of helping Calvin, the unexpected connection to a cake I'd made with genuine care. I'd entered Whisk and Wonder with such hope, not just to build a business, but to create something meaningful in a community that seemed to value surface over substance. My apartment felt less empty that night. Something about helping Calvin had shifted my perspective. I pulled out my grandmother's recipe book and turned to the page where I'd carefully transcribed Margaret Miller's red velvet cake recipe. It was old-fashioned, using beet juice for color instead of food dye, with a hint of lavender that most modern bakers would consider odd, but it had meant something. To Calvin. In the midst of all my failure, I'd gotten that one thing right. I fell asleep more peacefully than I had in weeks, the recipe book open beside me. The next morning, a sharp knock on my door startled me awake. Assuming it was a package delivery, I stumbled to answer it without bothering to check my appearance. Hair mussed, wearing an oversized t-shirt with "Life is short, eat dessert" first printed across it, but it wasn't a delivery person. Standing in my hallway was a woman who looked about my age, perhaps early 30s, with dark hair cut in a sleek bob and eyes that assessed me with unsettling intensity. She wore a fitted blazer over a simple black dress, and something about her posture screamed authority. "Samantha Riley?" she asked, though it didn't sound like a question. "Yes?" I pulled my shirt down self-consciously. She held up a familiar paper bag containing 3 crumpled receipts and a dried lavender sachet from my bakery. "You're the one who helped my grandfather yesterday," she said, her expression unreadable. "He told me about your cake, the one you made for my grandmother's funeral." I blinked, suddenly remembering the gossipy women's words. "The food? Critic granddaughter." Yes. Is he okay?" I asked. "May I come in?" she replied, ignoring my question. I hesitated, then stepped aside. As she entered, her eyes swept over the boxes stacked in my living room, the baking equipment still waiting to be stored away. "My name is Amelia Banks," she said, turning to face me. The name hit me like a physical blow. Not just any food critic. The food critic. The woman whose reviews could make or break restaurants across 3 counties. The writer whose scathing takedown of a pretentious French bistro had gone viral last year. "I know who you are," I managed. Her lips curved in the barest hint of a smile. "And I know who you are now, too." She picked up a whisk from an open box. "My grandfather never talks to strangers, but he talked about you. And about a cake you once made." I stared at Amelia Banks, struggling to process her presence in my apartment. The Amelia Banks, whose restaurant reviews were feared throughout the Tri-County area, whose Instagram posts could create hour-long lines outside previously unknown cafes. And she was here, holding a whisk from my failed bakery. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered, my hospitality instincts kicking in despite my confusion. "Yes," she said, setting the whisk down with deliberate care. Black. As I moved to the kitchen, I became acutely aware of my disheveled appearance and the chaos of my living space. Boxes of equipment, ingredients I couldn't bear to throw away, and stacks of unused packaging with the Whisk and Wonder logo, all evidence of my shattered dream. I apologized for the mess, I called over my shoulder. "I'm still processing everything." "The closure," she stated. Not a question. I nodded, measuring coffee grounds with hands that suddenly felt unsteady. 3 days ago, officially. "Why?" The bluntness of her question caught me off guard. I turned to find her examining a framed photo of my mother and me in our family kitchen, both covered in flour and laughing. "The usual reasons. Not enough customers. Too much competition. Wrong location." I paused. "Wrong neighborhood." Amelia's eyes met mine, sharp and assessing. "Wrong neighborhood or wrong approach?" the coffee maker hissed, filling the silence between us. I handed her a mug, trying not to feel judged by this woman who judged for a living. "Both, perhaps," I admitted. "Willow Heights Prefers polished storefronts and trendy concepts. I thought quality would be enough. She took a sip of coffee, her expression softening slightly. This is good. Thanks. It's nothing fancy. But it's real. She set the mug down and reached into her sleek leather bag, pulling out a manila folder. My grandfather told me you refused payment for my grandmother's memorial cake. It didn't feel right to charge for something like that. Why? Again, that directness. I considered my answer carefully. Your grandfather came in with this recipe card, worn thin from decades of use. He told me how your grandmother made this cake every year on their anniversary, how the lavender came from plants they grew together. My throat tightened at the memory. He just wanted to honor her one last time. With her own recipe. How could I charge for that? Amelia was silent for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the folder. That cake was the first thing he's talked about with any emotion since she died. He called me at 6 this morning to tell me about you. I didn't know how to respond to that. She opened the folder, revealing printouts of Whisk and Wonder's Instagram page, local, business listings, and what appeared to be financial projections. You were undercapitalized from the start, she said matter-of-factly. No marketing budget, no connections to local influencers, no strategic partnerships with event planners or corporate offices. She flipped through the pages. But your product was exceptional. I blinked. You tried my baking? 3 times, anonymously. The lavender shortbread was particularly noteworthy. My mind raced, trying to remember if I'd ever seen her in my shop. Had I served her personally? Had I known when a food critic of her caliber was tasting my work? I don't understand why you're here, I finally said. Amelia leaned forward, her intensity almost palpable. I'm investing in food brands that matter. You cared when no one else did. That counts. She laid out her proposition with the precision of someone accustomed to making business deals. A silent partnership. Her capital, marketing expertise, and name recognition. My recipes, skills, and vision. A new location for Whisk and Wonder. Still in Willow Heights, but in the emerging arts district where rent was lower and the clientele more appreciative of authenticity. Why would you take a chance on me after I've already failed? I asked when she finished. I don't see failure. I see a business that never had a fair start. Her eyes narrowed. And frankly, I'm tired of reviewing overpriced, mediocre establishments that succeed purely on aesthetic and social capital. Like Sweet Bean? I couldn't help asking. The ghost of a smile crossed her face. Their coffee is acceptable. Their pastries are an insult to flour. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of something like hope, but doubt quickly followed. I can't afford to lose anything else, I said quietly. Not financially or emotionally. Amelia stood, straightening her already impeccable blazer. I'm not asking for an answer today. Think about it. She handed me a business card with her personal number, written on the back. But I should warn you, I don't make offers like this often. As she moved toward the door, she turned back. One condition, though. If I invest, Whisk and Wonder is coming back. Bigger, better. But it has to stay real. No shortcuts, no factory frostings. I would never, I began, offended. I know, she interrupted. That's why I'm here. After she left, I sat among my boxes of failure, holding her business card like it might dissolve between my fingers. Amelia Banks wanted to invest in me, in my bakery, in my vision. It felt too good to be true. And in my experience, things that felt that way usually were. I called Zoe. She wants to what? She shrieked when I explained. Sam, do you know what this means? Amelia Banks is like the Simon Cowell of food critics, except with better hair and more power. But why me? I paced my small living room. Why now, after I've already closed? Who cares why? This is your second chance. And with her backing you, those Willow Heights snobs will be falling over themselves to post about your artisanal creations on their perfect little Instagram feeds. The thought made me pause. Was that what I wanted? Validation from the same community that had rejected me? Later that evening, I pulled out my grandmother's recipe book again. The pages fell open to a note she'd written inside the cover. Baking isn't just about feeding bodies. It's about nourishing souls. That's what I'd wanted to do with Whisk and Wonder. Not just sell pretty desserts, but create moments of connection and comfort, like I had for Calvin Miller. I picked up my phone and dialed Amelia's number before I could change my mind. I have conditions of my own, I said when she answered. I'm listening. I need creative control. And I want to offer a pay-what-you-can option one day each month for people who can't afford specialty baking. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought she might have hung up. "Done," she finally said. "Anything else?" I took a deep breath. "Yes. The first cake we make when we reopen will be your grandmother's red velvet with lavender glaze. On the house. For your grandfather." This time the silence felt different. Softer somehow. "I'll draw up the paperwork," Amelia said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "We reopen in 6 weeks." The new Whisk and Wonder space was nothing like I'd imagined. Whereas my original shop had been cramped and dark despite my best efforts, this converted artist's loft had soaring ceilings, exposed brick walls, and windows that bathed everything in natural light. Located in what locals called the Fringe, the border between Willow Heights proper and the more eclectic neighboring community, it felt both accessible and special. The previous tenant was a photographer, Amelia explained as we toured the empty space 5 weeks before our planned opening. "The lighting is exceptional, which means every pastry you create will be Instagram-worthy without effort." I ran my hand along the reclaimed wood countertop that would become our display area. "It's perfect." "No," she corrected. "It will be perfect when it smells like butter and vanilla instead of paint." Working with Amelia was nothing like I expected. I'd anticipated a demanding taskmaster who would critique my every move. Instead, I discovered a focused professional who respected boundaries, hers and mine. She handled the business side with ruthless efficiency. Permits, inspections, equipment orders, staffing. My domain remained the kitchen and the menu. "You're the heart," she told me. During our third planning meeting. "I'm just the scaffolding." 3 weeks before opening, I arrived at the half-finished space to find Amelia sitting with her grandfather. Calvin looked much better than the last time I'd seen him. Color in his cheeks, his white hair neatly combed, a sparkle in his eyes as he examined the framed vintage recipe cards we planned to hang on one wall. "Miss Riley," he said, standing with the help of his cane. "Or may I call you Samantha?" "Sam, please." I smiled, genuinely happy to see him. "Sam, then. I wanted to thank you properly." He gestured to the space around us. "Though it seems my granddaughter has already done that in grand fashion." "Your collapse was hardly planned, grandfather," Amelia said dryly, but there was affection in her voice I'd never heard before. "Fortuitous timing, nevertheless," he replied with a wink in my direction. As the opening date approached, word began to spread through carefully orchestrated whispers. Amelia had connections at every local publication, food blog, and influencer account. But rather than announcing her involvement, she kept her name completely out of the marketing. "This is your redemption, not mine," she said when I questioned her strategy. "Besides, I can hardly review a bakery I've invested in, can I?" The night before our opening, I couldn't sleep. I baked instead, testing and retesting the special items I'd planned for our first day. My small apartment kitchen couldn't accommodate the volume a commercial space could, but it was enough to perfect the recipes. At 3 a.m., someone knocked on my door. Flour-covered and exhausted, I opened it to find Amelia, equally awake but dressed as impeccably as always. "You're stress baking," she stated. I gestured to the cooling racks covering every surface. "What gave it away?" She stepped inside, surveying the chaos with an appraising eye. "The red velvet looks perfect. It's for your grandfather. I wanted to get it right." She picked up a lavender shortbread cookie, inhaling its fragrance before taking a precise bite. "You're afraid," she observed. "Terrified," I admitted. "What if we fail again? Then we fail having created something authentic." She finished the cookie. "But we won't fail." "How can you be so sure?" Amelia rarely smiled fully. Her usual expression was a composed half-smile that revealed nothing. But now her face softened into something genuine. "Because this time, you're not alone." Opening day dawned bright and clear. I arrived at 4 a.m. to begin baking, surprised to find Zoe already there, sleeves rolled up. "Like I'd miss this," she said, hugging me tightly. By 6 a.m., the scent of fresh pastry filled the space. By 7 a.m., a small line had formed outside despite our 8 a.m. opening time. By 9 a.m., we'd sold out of morning pastries and were rushing to prepare more. Amelia moved through the crowd like a silent guardian, observing everything, occasionally making subtle adjustments to the display or the music volume. She never stood behind the counter or took credit, but her presence steadied me. The first familiar face from the old neighborhood appeared mid-morning, a mother with the daughter who had loved my butterfly cookies. "We saw the announcement online," the woman said, smiling. "Emma insisted we come on opening day." The little girl peered into the display case. "Do you still make the butterfly cookies?" I leaned down to her eye level. I made a special batch just in case you came by. Her delighted expression made every hardship of the past year worth it. Throughout the day, more Willow Heights residents trickled in, some curious, some genuinely supportive. Noticeably absent were Christine and her inner circle, which suited me fine. At precisely 3 p.m., Calvin Miller arrived, accompanied by a caregiver. The bustle of the bakery quieted momentarily as Amelia emerged from the back office to greet him. "Right on schedule, grandfather." He beamed at her, then at me. "I wouldn't miss it." I brought out the special cake I'd prepared, Margaret's red velvet with lavender glaze, decorated simply with crystallized flower petals. "The first official cake of the new Whiskin Wonder," I announced, setting it before him, "in honor of Margaret." Calvin's eyes misted over as he gazed at the cake. "She would have loved this place," he said softly. "The light, the warmth, the care you put into everything." As I cut him the first slice, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up to see Christine Whitman and 2 of her friends entering, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. "Well," Christine said, surveying the crowded space, "this is unexpected." I felt my stomach tighten at Christine's arrival, but kept my expression neutral as I finished, serving Calvin his slice of cake. The elderly man seemed oblivious to the tension, his attention fully on the red velvet creation before him. "Welcome to Whiskin Wonder," I said, straightening up to face Christine and her entourage. "What can I get for you today?" Christine's gaze darted around the bustling bakery, lingering on the line of customers still stretching to the door. "We heard there was a new place opening in the fringe. Didn't realize it was you." She emphasized the last word with barely disguised surprise. One of her friends, Diane, the real estate agent, leaned in to whisper something, but Christine silenced her with a subtle hand gesture. "I'd recommend the lavender shortbread," said a cool voice from behind me. "It's particularly noteworthy." Amelia stepped forward, coffee cup in hand, regarding Christine with the detached interest of someone observing an unusual insect specimen. I watched Christine's face transform as recognition dawned. "You're Amelia Banks," she breathed, suddenly straightening her designer blouse. "The food critic." "Among other things," Amelia replied, her tone revealing nothing. Christine's demeanor shifted instantly, a practiced smile, replacing her previous condescension. "We're such fans of your column. I didn't realize you frequented establishments in this area." "I frequent establishments with integrity," Amelia said simply, then turned to me. "Sam, you should check on the second batch of croissants. I believe they're ready." It was a graceful exit opportunity, and I took it gratefully, retreating to the kitchen where Zoe was already removing perfectly golden croissants from the oven. "Was that Christine Whitman I just saw?" Zoe whispered, eyes wide. "And was Amelia actually being protective?" "Both, apparently," I said, feeling slightly dazed. Through the kitchen service window, I watched as Amelia coolly guided Christine and her friends to a small table, then returned to Calvin, who was now savoring his cake. With closed eyes, lost in memory or appreciation, or both. For the remainder of the afternoon, I focused on what I did best, creating beautiful, authentic baked goods that made people pause in their busy lives to truly taste something. With each pastry I handed over, each smile I received in return, the sting of my previous failure faded slightly. By closing time, we had sold out of nearly everything. Zoe flipped the sign to "closed" with a dramatic flourish and collapsed into a chair. "That," she announced, "was insane, in the absolute best way." Amelia emerged from the back office, a rare look of satisfaction on her usually composed face. "The online engagement metrics are exceptional. We've already been tagged in over 200 social media posts." I wiped flour from my forehead, suddenly aware of how exhausted I was. "Is that good? For a first day? It's unprecedented." She scrolled through her phone. "The local blog has already posted a preview. Whisk and Wonder returns. Redemption never tasted so sweet." Calvin, who had stayed far longer than I expected, raised his coffee cup in a toast. "To second chances," he said, his voice wavering slightly with emotion. "To second chances," we echoed. After everyone left, I sat alone in the quiet bakery, listening to the gentle ticking of the vintage clock we'd hung above the register. The space still smelled of butter and sugar and possibility. I ran my fingers over the marble countertop, the smooth wood of the display case, the embossed business cards with the Whiskin Wonder logo, golden and restored. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. "Check the community forum." With trembling fingers, I opened the Willow Heights community app I'd once deleted in shame. The top post was from Christine Whitman herself. Discovered a hidden gem today. The newly reopened Whisk and Wonder Bakery is a must-visit. Artisanal treats that put chain cafes to shame. Support local. Willow Heights finds. Below her post were dozens of comments, including several from her inner circle who had never once set foot in my original shop. The hypocrisy should have angered me, but instead I felt a strange sense of peace. Their approval or disapproval no longer defined me. I closed the app without responding and texted Amelia back. Thank you. Her reply came seconds later. For what? For believing in me when no one else did, not even me. 3 dots appeared as she typed, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, get some rest. Tomorrow will be even busier. The next morning, I arrived to find a small package propped against the bakery door. Inside was a vintage cake server with an ornate silver handle and a note in elegant handwriting. This was Margaret's. She would want it used in a place that honors the art of, baking. Calvin. I held the server carefully, feeling the weight of its history and the responsibility it represented. This wasn't just about proving myself to Willow Heights anymore. It was about honoring traditions, creating new memories, and building something authentic in a world that often settled for less. As predicted, our second day was even busier than the first. Word had spread beyond Willow Heights to neighboring communities, bringing customers who had no preconceptions about me or my previous failure. They came simply for the quality of what we offered. By the end of our first week, we had established a rhythm. Mornings were for the commuters seeking coffee and pastry before work. Mid-mornings brought mothers with young children and remote workers seeking a change of scenery. Afternoons were filled with special order pickups and people treating themselves after difficult days. And through it all, Amelia remained in the background, observing, adjusting, occasionally stepping in to manage a difficult situation, but never taking credit. Why do you stay silent about your involvement? I asked her one evening as we reviewed the day's sales. Your name would bring even more attention. She looked up from her laptop, expression thoughtful. Because this isn't about me. It's about what you create. She closed the computer. Besides, I've built a career on critical distance. This is the first time I've crossed that line. Why did you? Cross the line, I mean. Amelia was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully as she always did. My grandmother taught me to recognize authenticity in food, in people. She met my eyes directly. It's rare. When you find it, you protect it. 1 month after our reopening, I received an email that made my heart skip a beat. The subject line read, Willow Heights Community Festival, Catering Request. The annual festival, where I had once poured lemonade while enduring whispers and where Calvin had collapsed, was approaching again. This time, the committee was requesting that Whisk and Wonder provide desserts for the VIP tent and judges' reception. The message was signed by Christine Whitman herself. I forwarded it to Amelia with a single question mark. Her response was immediate. Your call. But remember who you were baking for when no one was watching. That evening, as I closed the shop, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Calvin, leaning on his cane but looking stronger than I'd seen him yet. I hope I'm not intruding, he said, his eyes crinkling with a smile. I wanted to see how Margaret's cake server was being put to use. It's become our good luck charm, I told him, inviting him in despite the closed sign. Would you like some tea? I just made a fresh pot. He settled at a small table near the window while I prepared a tray with tea and a few leftover pastries. Outside, the first hints of autumn touched the trees lining the fringe, their leaves just beginning to turn gold at the edges. Amelia tells me the bakery is thriving, Calvin said as I joined him. Beyond my expectations, I admitted. We're already talking about hiring another baker. And how are you finding your return to Willow Heights society? He asked, his tone gently probing. I considered the question carefully. Different. The same people who ignored or criticized me before now post about their discoveries at Whisk and Wonder. It's educational. Calvin chuckled softly. Community is a complex organism, Samantha. People move as a herd until something or someone disrupts the pattern. Like Amelia, I suggested. Like you, he corrected. My granddaughter merely amplified what was already there. He sipped his tea thoughtfully. Did you know I was the city planner who designed the original Willow Heights Center? Back in the 1970s? I shook my head, surprised. I wanted to create a space where community could flourish organically. Parks with benches facing each other, not just the view. Wider sidewalks to encourage stopping and chatting. His eyes grew distant with memory. Somewhere along the way, it became about property values and appearances instead. The festival committee has asked us to cater their event, I confided, unsure why I was sharing this with him. The same event where they practically celebrated my failure last year. Calvin set down his teacup, his gaze sharpening. And what will you do? I don't know yet, I admitted. Part of me wants to decline out of principle. And the other part? I smiled ruefully. Wants to show up with the most spectacular desserts they've ever seen. Is that petty? It's human. He reached across the table to pat my hand. But consider this. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in proving others wrong, but in remaining true to yourself regardless of how they treated you. His words stayed with me long after he left. That night, I sat in my apartment, no longer crowded with boxes of failure, but now filled with fresh flowers and new cookbooks, and drafted my response to Christine. Dear Christine, I wrote, Whisk and Wonder would be honored to provide desserts for the festival. As this event holds special significance for us, we would like to offer our services at cost, with 10% of proceeds donated to the Willow Heights Senior Center in honor of Calvin Miller's contributions to our community. Please find our proposed menu attached. I sent it before I could second-guess myself, then texted Amelia. I said yes to the festival, with conditions. Her reply came as I was drifting off to sleep. I expected nothing less. The weeks leading up to the festival were a whirlwind of preparation. Beyond our regular bakery operations, we now had to plan for serving hundreds of festival attendees. I hired 2 part-time assistants and spent late nights testing recipes that could be prepared in advance and would hold up in outdoor conditions. Amelia was conspicuously absent during this time, traveling for a series of restaurant reviews in neighboring counties. But she checked in daily, offering suggestions and support from afar. Don't let them change your vision, she texted the night before the event. They hired Whisk and Wonder, not Sweet Bean. The morning of the festival dawned clear and cool, perfect weather for an outdoor event. Zoe arrived at my apartment at 5 a.m., coffee in hand and determination in her eyes. Ready to conquer the kingdom? She asked, helping me load the last of my equipment into her car. I took a deep breath, thinking of how different this day was from a year ago. Ready. The festival grounds were already bustling with vendors setting up tents and displays. Our space, significantly larger than a standard booth, was positioned prominently near the main stage. As we began unloading, I noticed several members of the committee watching us curiously. Christine approached as we were arranging the display stands, her smile wide but her eyes calculating. Samantha, everything looks wonderful already. She surveyed our setup with the air of someone conducting an inspection. I was so pleased when you accepted our invitation. It shows such graciousness. Thank Implication was clear. I should be grateful for this opportunity at Redemption. A year ago, her condescension would have cut deep. Today, it barely registered. The community deserves quality, I replied simply. We're happy to provide it. Her smile faltered slightly at my calm confidence. Well, yes, of course. She glanced around. Is Ms. Banks joining us today? Several committee members were hoping to meet her. Amelia has other commitments, I said, which was true. She had deliberately scheduled reviews elsewhere to avoid accusations of favoritism. But she sends her regards. As Christine walked away, Zoe leaned close. That was masterful. You didn't even flinch when she tried to make it sound like charity. I arranged a tray of lavender shortbread with steady hands. Because it doesn't matter anymore what she thinks. It only matters what we create. By midday, the festival was in full swing. Our booth had a constant line, and the special cake I'd prepared for the judges' reception, a modern interpretation of a traditional apple stack cake with local honey and rosemary, had received audible gasps when unveiled. I was refilling a display when I spotted Calvin making his way, slowly through the crowd, accompanied by a young man who appeared to be his caregiver. When he reached our booth, he broke into a wide smile. "Look at you now," he said, taking in the bustling scene around us. Margaret would have loved this. I stepped out from behind the counter to hug him gently. "I saved something special for you," I told him, retrieving a small box containing a miniature version of his wife's red velvet cake. As I handed it to him, a commotion near the main stage caught everyone's attention. The festival coordinator was making an emergency announcement, his voice tinged with panic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a situation with our main event. The celebration cake for the mayor's presentation has been damaged in transit. If anyone has suggestions for a replacement in the next hour, please see me immediately." Calvin's eyes met mine, twinkling with mischief. Sometimes, he said quietly, the universe has a sense of humor. Tentar novamente. The festival coordinator's panicked announcement hung in the air. For a heartbeat, I hesitated, feeling the weight of all eyes turning toward our booth, the only professional bakery present. Can you do it? Zoe whispered urgently. A presentation cake in an hour? I glanced at Calvin, who gave me an encouraging nod, then surveyed our supplies. We had brought extra ingredients for emergencies, but creating a celebration cake worthy of the mayor's presentation would push the limits of what was possible in a festival tent with portable equipment. We can, I said, decision made. Get me the, coordinator. The next few minutes were a blur of rapid planning. The mayor's presentation would celebrate Willow Heights' centennial, with local officials and founding family descendants in attendance. The original cake, ordered from a prestigious bakery in the neighboring city, had been an elaborate three-tier creation that toppled when the delivery van hit a pothole. Whatever you can manage would be appreciated, the coordinator said, clearly expecting something modest given the constraints. I looked at the crowd gathering around our tent, including Christine and several committee members watching with barely concealed skepticism. Give me 45 minutes, I replied. Zoe's eyes widened. Seriously? Call the bakery, I told her. Have them deliver the emergency kit. This was, something Amelia had insisted on creating, a collection of pre-made decorative elements, food coloring, and specialized tools kept ready for unexpected opportunities. As Zoe made the call, I cleared our prep table and began working with what we had. Fortunately, I had prepared extra layers of our signature vanilla bean cake for the festival, intending them for cake cups. Those would form the foundation. What can I do? Asked a familiar voice. I looked up to see Calvin's caregiver rolling up his sleeves. You bake? I asked, surprised. Culinary school, he grinned. I'm Miguel. I work with Mr. Miller part-time while finishing my degree. Start on the buttercream, I directed, feeling a surge of hope. Word spread quickly through the festival that Whisk and Wonder was attempting to save the centennial presentation. A small crowd gathered to watch through the open sides of our tent, their phones recording the process. Among them, I spotted Christine, her expression a mixture of concern and calculation. The emergency kit arrived 15 minutes later, delivered by one of our part-time assistants who had been working at the bakery. With these additional supplies, the cake began, taking shape, a two-tier creation with a swirling design reminiscent of the hills surrounding Willow Heights. Miguel proved himself an able assistant, his piping technique precise and confident. As we worked, Calvin sat nearby, occasionally offering words of encouragement. This reminds me of Margaret, he said at one point. She once baked a wedding cake during a power outage, using the neighbor's gas stove and finishing by candlelight. That image of a determined woman creating beauty amidst constraints spurred me on. With 10 minutes to spare, I added the final touches, delicate sugar flowers in the town's colors, and an edible gold-painted emblem of the original town seal that I had fortunately included in our decorative elements. When we finished, a spontaneous round of applause broke out from the onlookers. The cake wasn't as elaborate as the original might have been, but it had soul, a handcrafted tribute to the community created under pressure with authentic ingredients and genuine care. The coordinator appeared dumbstruck. This is not what I expected. It's better. We carefully transferred the cake to a rolling cart, and I personally escorted it to the main stage area, hyper-aware of every bump and dip in the path. The mayor, a silver-haired woman I'd never formally met, waited near the stage with several officials. You must be the miracle worker I've been hearing about, she said, extending her hand. I'm Mayor Eleanor Winters. Samantha Riley, I replied, shaking her hand. From Whisk and Wonder? She studied the cake with appreciation. I'm told you created this in under an hour. With help, I acknowledged, gesturing toward Miguel, who had followed with additional supplies. Well, it saved our centennial moment. The town of Willow Heights is grateful. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. And I'm personally grateful. Between us, I've been trying to get a decent piece of cake in this town for years. That chain place just doesn't cut it. I laughed, surprised by her candor. Maybe you should stop by the bakery sometime. Count on it, she smiled. The presentation went flawlessly. As the mayor spoke about Willow Heights' history and future, the cake stood as a visual representation of community pride. When the ceremonial cutting came, photographers crowded forward, and I found myself unexpectedly included in the official photos. A toast, announced Mayor Winters, to Willow Heights' past, present, and future, and to neighbors helping neighbors in times of need. The crowd applauded, and as I looked across the sea of faces, I saw something I hadn't expected. Respect. Not just for the cake, but for the spirit behind it. The willingness to step up when needed without hesitation or resentment. After the ceremony, I returned to, our tent to find it busier than ever, with a line stretching well beyond the adjacent booths. Zoe was efficiently managing sales, but looked relieved when she spotted me. "You're famous now," she said, nodding toward a group of teenagers comparing photos of the cake on their phones. "We've sold almost everything." As the afternoon wore on, familiar faces from the neighborhood stopped by, not to criticize or condescend, but to offer genuine compliments and, in some cases, apologies thinly disguised as congratulations. "We always knew you had potential," said one woman who had been particularly vocal about my failure. "You just needed the right concept." I accepted these comments with grace, neither reminding them of their previous attitudes nor indulging in petty satisfaction. The victory wasn't in proving them wrong. It was in proving myself right. Near closing time, Christine appeared again, this time without her entourage. She waited until the line had diminished before approaching. "The committee would like to present you with a token of appreciation," she said formally, handing me an envelope. "And I would like to apologize. Personally." I accepted the envelope but shook my head at her apology. "No need. We all make judgments. Some just prove to be wrong." "Still," she persisted, uncharacteristically humble, "I was unnecessarily harsh. About your bakery. About you." "Thank you for saying that," I replied simply. After she left, I opened the envelope to find a certificate naming Whisk and Wonder as Business of the Year, along with a check that would cover a month's rent. As the festival wound down and we began packing up, my phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. "How did it go?" I smiled, typing back, "You already know, don't you?" Her response came immediately. Front page of the community website, local baker saves centennial celebration. Not bad for someone they were gossiping about a year ago. I looked around at the festival grounds, at the community that had once rejected me now embracing what I created. "It was never about them," I texted back, "but it feels good anyway." 6 months after the festival, Whisk and Wonder had become a Willow Heights institution. What began as curiosity and social media buzz had transformed into genuine loyalty. We'd expanded our hours, hired 3 full-time staff members, and even begun wholesale distribution to select local cafes, though never to Sweet Bean, which had recently renovated to include more artisanal offerings that bore a suspicious resemblance to our menu. Winter had given way to spring, and with it came new possibilities. Amelia and I sat in the bakery after hours, reviewing plans for what had once seemed impossible, a second location. "The numbers support expansion," she said, scrolling through projections on her tablet. "And the Riverside district has the demographic we're looking for, people who value authenticity over trendiness." I ran my finger along the rim of my teacup, considering. Is it too soon? I don't want to lose what makes this place special. "Growth doesn't have to mean compromise," Amelia replied, her tone gentler than it had been in our early days of partnership. Over months of working together, her sharp edges had softened slightly, and my insecurities had diminished. We had developed a rhythm, a mutual respect that transcended our professional relationship. The bell above the door chimed unexpectedly. I looked up, surprised since we'd locked up an hour ago, to see Calvin making his way inside, accompanied by Miguel and, to my astonishment, Mayor Winters. "Sorry to interrupt," Calvin called cheerfully, using his cane to gesture toward the mayor. "Eleanor insisted on joining our regular Thursday cake date when she heard we were stopping by." "We're closed, but you're always welcome," I said, rising to greet them. Calvin's weekly visits had become a cherished tradition. Every Thursday, he and Miguel would arrive just before closing for cake and conversation. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," Mayor Winters said, extending her hand to Amelia. "The famous Ms. Banks, I presume? Your partnership with Samantha has been transformative for our business district." Amelia accepted the handshake with her characteristic reserve. "Sam did the transforming. I just provided resources." "And removed obstacles," Calvin added knowingly. "I brought out cake for everyone. A new recipe I'd been perfecting, almond sponge with orange blossom water and honey, and we settled around the largest table. Through the windows, the street lamps of Willow Heights cast a warm glow on the spring evening, highlighting the new flower planters the community association had installed along the sidewalks. "Actually," Mayor Winters said after complimenting, The cake. This isn't entirely a social visit. I have a proposition for you both. Amelia raised an eyebrow, instantly alert. What kind of proposition? The old community center is being reimagined, the mayor explained. We want to create a culinary education space, cooking classes for adults, baking workshops for children, nutritional programs for families on limited budgets. Sounds worthwhile, I said cautiously, sensing there was more. We need someone to spearhead it, she continued. Someone who understands both the craft and the community aspects of food. Someone who's proven they can create something meaningful from scratch. Her eyes met mine directly. Someone like you, Samantha. I blinked in surprise. Me? I'm not a teacher. You taught me, Miguel interjected. I've learned more working part-time with you than in a year of culinary school. Calvin nodded in agreement. You have a gift for sharing knowledge, not just skills. I glanced at Amelia, expecting skepticism about this unexpected detour from our expansion plans. Instead, I found her watching me thoughtfully. It would mean dividing your time, she said, considering the implications. We'd need to restructure management at the bakery. Which brings me to the second part of my visit, Mayor Winters added. The city would purchase a significant number of baked goods for various functions, including the expanded senior programs. It could offset any reduction in your direct involvement at Whisk and Wonder. As they discussed logistics, I found myself thinking about my journey. From a failed bakery owner pouring lemonade at a festival to someone being recruited to help shape the community's relationship with food. The irony wasn't lost on me. I need to think about it, I finally said. It's a generous offer, but a significant commitment. Later, after our visitors had left, Amelia and I remained at the table, the bakery quiet except for the gentle hum of refrigerators. You should do it, she said unexpectedly. Really? What about our expansion plans? She closed her tablet decisively. The expansion can wait. This matters more. Why? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. Amelia was silent for a moment, choosing her words carefully, as she always did. When I invested in Whisk and Wonder, I thought I was saving a good bakery. I didn't realize we were creating something that could change people's relationship with food and with each other. She met my gaze directly. That's worth more than a second location. I thought about Calvin and his stories of Margaret, about Miguel's growing confidence in the kitchen, about the children who pressed their noses against our display case with wonder in their eyes. We could do both, I suggested. Eventually, the education center and the expansion. A rare, full smile crossed Amelia's face. One thing at a time, Sam. You've already proven you can rebuild from nothing. There's no rush for what comes next. The following Sunday, I visited Calvin at his Victorian home on Maple Street, something that had become a monthly tradition. His health had improved steadily over the past year, and he had recently begun sorting through Margaret's belongings, a task he'd avoided since her death. I found something you should have, he said, presenting me with a weathered wooden recipe box. Margaret's collection. Some have been in her family for generations. I accepted the box with reverence, understanding the magnitude of what he was entrusting to me. Are you sure? Absolutely. He nodded. Recipes should live in kitchens where they'll be used and loved. Besides, he added with a twinkle in his eye, this way I can still taste her cooking when I visit the bakery. As I carefully looked through the cards, some yellowed with age, others stained from use, I found the original red velvet cake recipe that had brought us together. Attached to it was a faded photograph of a young couple standing proudly in front of a small bakery, Miller's Home Baking, painted on the window behind them. You never told me you and Margaret had a bakery, I said, surprised. Calvin smiled wistfully. For 5 years before I went into city planning, it was her dream more than mine. The timing wasn't right, and we had to close. He tapped the recipe card gently, but she never stopped baking, never stopped believing that food made with care mattered. In that moment, the full circle of our connection became clear. His collapse at the festival, Amelia's unexpected investment, the community that had shifted from rejection to embrace, none of it was coincidence. It was the natural unfolding of a story that had begun long before my bakery ever opened. 2 weeks later, I stood in the empty space that would become the Willow Heights Culinary Center, envisioning the possibilities. Sunshine streamed through large windows, illuminating the potential for what this place could become. Not just a teaching facility, but a hub for community connection. My phone buzzed with a text from Amelia. Decision made? I smiled, typing back. Yes, we're doing this. Her response was immediate and uncharacteristically emotional. Margaret would be proud. So am I. As I walked back to Whisk and Wonder through the streets of Willow Heights, streets that had once felt hostile but now felt like home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I had lost everything, only to gain something more valuable: purpose, community, and the confidence that comes from rebuilding on a stronger foundation. The bakery came into view, its eyes windows glowing with warmth, a line of customers stretching down the sidewalk despite the late afternoon hour. Through the glass, I could see Zoe, now our manager, laughing with a customer while wrapping a cake box with our signature ribbon. This was never just about baking. It was about creating something real in a world that often settled for less. About finding your people, even in unlikely places. About how one act of kindness can ripple outward in ways you never imagine. Sometimes the most powerful recipe isn't in the kitchen. It's in how you treat people when no one's watching.